Thank you for listening and welcome back to Property Deconstructed, the collective wisdom of all things property and real estate, here with some associates and friends and colleagues in the industry and other professionals. Back for our 22nd episode now with Melissa Barlas, who you listened to in our previous episode. We're going to unpack a little bit more of first home buyer risks and things that purchasers when buying real estate should look out for. So thanks again for joining us, Mel, and Jack, our producer at the desk as well. Thanks. Welcome back.
Just
Jack.
here to push the buttons, Mark.
Yes. No, very vital member of the team. So thank you.
Thank you.
And Mel, we were talking in the last episode about the third point or the third risk. We covered off no pre-purchase contract reviews as a common risk or risk that people try to review contracts on their own, inadequate budgets and considering future running costs and feasibility of holding property and initial budgets to settle property as well, and hidden costs or unexpected costs. And we touched on pre-building inspections of structural integrity, plumbing and electrical, which in my experience as a independent buyer's advocate and real estate industry professional, it is commonly missed, plumbing and electrical. And so if you wanted to elaborate a little bit more on that side where we left off, but yes, definitely structural building inspections is a must when the timing allows, when you have time within a campaign.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So just to recap, as per the previous episode, I've mentioned very important before you buy to invest in getting a building and pest inspector into your property to check the structural integrity of it, but not just limiting yourself to that inspector, but also getting very important trades in like an electrician to check the electrical safety of the property, as well as a plumber to check the drainage pipes, just to see, are they blocked? Is there something wrong? Because that can impact how much you offer and whether you're actually prepared to make an offer in the first place.
Yes, yeah, and we're pointing out things for first home buyers and any buyer in particular that may be looking to occupy. I think it's always important before you move in to do those checks, and we always recommend it to clients. But for investors in particular, they're in Victoria as well. There's a lot of minimum standards on property safety and minimum standards of operation of a dwelling or building. So the structural integrity, the plumbing and electrical standards and gas safety checks and electrical safety checks to make sure they're adequate. The common risks now, the state government is actually suggesting increasing the level of minimum standards. So there'll be more costs even for investors there. The difficulty is negotiating time to get the plumbers and electricians in during, say, a 4 or 5 week sales campaign. But as far as the checks go, people normally think a building inspector may be able to cover that in a structural report. They can't. So that's. Do you see people come back to you post-purchase as a solicitor and a property lawyer coming back saying, well, there was electrical issues or plumbing issues and these unforeseen costs because they didn't get these checks done?
That's exactly right. Yeah, absolutely. I've had that before where, yes, they've got the inspector in but didn't bother to flush the toilet to see if the toilet worked, and then closer to settlement they've come in and done their pre-settlement inspection, and then lo and behold they've said the toilet doesn't work, and then we've got a dispute on hand where you've got a seller saying it was like that the whole time and you bought it as is.
Where's the evidence?
And and the building inspection report doesn't show that that you've tested the toilet or that there's any issues with the plumbing. So those trades are absolutely pivotal to engage before you buy, because once you've bought and the contract becomes unconditional, you've bought it as is.
Yes.
So the onus is on the buyer.
Yeah, and there's a few things there. One, timing, getting them in if they're available, especially plumbers. They're not always readily available to do a report, but if you can, definitely negotiate it, I'd say, as part of a special condition. And with the minimum standards checks, there's a lot of great professionals offering that, plumbers and electricians, because the building inspectors aren't licensed to comment on that. I personally found, and I don't know how or what suggestions may be around this, but if a vendor is allowed and afforded a buyer to come in and do these checks, and an agent's allowed access before the property's sold, but if that electrician or plumber finds a vital issue that's a hazard, they're obligated by law to report it or cut off the gas or whatever's unsafe. That's can be a bit of a sticking point because the vendors
Yes.
don't want their utilities cut off during a sales campaign, and revealing a material fact as well.
Yes.
Could there be some things to be explored? Because this is a lot of new territory, these minimum standards checks for
Yeah,
investors.
it's definitely an issue, and you can't as a buyer dictate what the vendor will and will not allow, who they will and will not allow to step into their property.
Yes,
That's just the reality. So it's all part of negotiation, but that's something that we do for clients. We
yes,
we negotiate these things into contracts all the time, and as you pointed out before as well, if time is of the essence and we just don't have time to bring these professionals in, we negotiate to see if we can make the contract conditional on that taking place.
yes.
And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but you don't know. There's nothing to lose, and you don't know unless you try.
Yeah. No, well, even
But
better
yeah,
reason to engage property solicitors and conveyancers early on to give you that advice of what to do as a good
that's right.
checklist. Um,
Yep.
and I'm mindful of time and your time as well. I really appreciate you coming in. But
Thank you.
I've looked at some of your top 5 tips, of common mistakes for first home buyers, and some of the other parts that you've mentioned. Making a signed offer on contract and some advice around that, or not considering equity. Impacts of capital gain over time, and things for first home buyers. So you touch on the points that are most important to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, uh, One mistake that I see happen from time to time with especially first home buyers more than anyone is when you make an offer on a property without realizing that you've actually entered into the contract to buy the property because of the language that the real estate agent has used with you, for
Okay.
example. So you might have walked in, or spoken to the agent, said, yep, this is the offer that I want to make to buy this property. And they say, great, sign this document as part of making your offer. It's a letter of offer, but really it's actually the contract of sale. And I've seen that happen many times. And it's you question the ethics around that dealing, but certainly it happens. And the way to avoid that is, again, like we've been saying, speak early on to a experienced licensed conveyancer or a property lawyer like myself, and we'll be able to decipher what it is that you're being asked to sign very, very quickly and very easily. So you
Yes.
can give us a call and just say, "Hey, agents asked me to sign this document. They're calling it a letter of offer or something else. I just want to check, is this actually the contract?" So keep that at the forefront of your mind, because the agent is the first person that usually you'll see, aside from your mortgage broker, before we come into it. And you're relying on what other people are telling you when you're buying property for the first time, and you're thinking and you're expecting that they're telling you the right thing.
That's
But
really
technically,
important.
agents will act for the seller. That's technically their role, to act for the seller, um, despite their dealings with yourself. So always good to double check what you're signing before you sign it.
And I think, yeah, that's a great piece of advice. And asking that your legal professional, the solicitor or conveyancer, I guess, that point would be raised about their calling off rights, understanding that, or the conditional rights if they've got subject to finance, and the process in that if they need to exit if they're not satisfying conditions. That's a really good point.
That's right. And the last point I also wanted to mention was about this concept of equity, which is very foreign to a lot of people, even those that have actually bought before, about what is equity. So when you buy a property, it's very easy to start looking for what's the cheapest thing on the market, especially if you're going in for the first time. You might look like at a high-rise apartment and go, that's a really cool buy. I'll buy into that because I'm getting that, one better or two better for, 400, 450K, and happy days to me. But if wealth creation is part of your overall strategy so that you can live a good life for yourself and your family, um, you need to very carefully consider what property is going to set me up for the next property and the next property and the next property to build some sort of passive income for me and my family. So it's not always about buying the cheapest price, but buying the cheapest property, but considering does this property have or will this property gain enough equity over time? So if I can try and explain that as simply as possible, equity is effectively like the difference between the value of the property that appreciates over time and the overall debt that's attached to the property. So whatever the gap is, you can potentially access about 80%, depending on your income status at that time, to then use that money or draw down on that money to help fund the next purchase, so
Leverage.
that you're not dipping into your savings necessarily. Of course, you need to consider whether you can sustain, repayments. So you need to really work with a
Yeah.
good financial planner and mortgage broker around that. And you can consult experts like Mark on this show, because he's all over that concept as
Oh,
I am.
yeah.
You
Look,
speak
it's
to
always
either of
great
us or
advice
both of us.
if you're going for
So
growth over tax savings or initial savings on what you think's a cheap buy. Then no
that's
growth,
right.
then there's no benefit in the future over time.
That's right. So there's a lot of factors when you speak to like a buyer's advocate like Mark, for example, he'll know what factors you need to take into account to determine whether this is a good investment or it's not. And equity is a very important concept that gets taken into account to determine, is this the property you should be buying? So very important to have a chat to someone like Mark and myself, to determine what's going to be the best buy. But most importantly, Mark, on that.
Yeah.
And that was the last point
No,
I
it
wanted
was
to
great,
make.
great, really jam-packed gold nuggets of information when buying property there, Mel. And thanks so much for coming on, listeners. It's Melissa Barlas from Conveyed, Property Solicitors, and also host and creator of the First Home Show podcast, where you can follow more information about buying property to occupy or invest, and things to be aware of. So thanks so much for coming on, and thanks to Jack for driving the ship as well.
Mark, Melissa, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Pleasure. Thank you.